Hello, and welcome back to another episode of More Than Milestones. This one, I'm excited but nervous about recording. So, I'm going to tell you my birth stories. Well, I'm definitely going to share odds and lives because I've never shared it, and I'm a little nervous too. I don't know if it's going to be this episode or a different one, but we're going to start with odd and live and see where it goes because the most recent podcast with Illiyin was really powerful for me, and thinking about birth trauma and giving myself grace when my tendency is to be like, it wasn't that bad, or people have had it so much worse, like minimizing my own experience because, that's what I do. I feel like it just gave me permission to be like, you know what? No, my stories deserve to be told because they're a huge part of me and my babies and my postpartum experience, And if you listen to that episode, I did touch a little bit on kind of like the trauma with Audrey's birth, but I'm going to just like start to finish tell you right now. Let's do it. So, let's kick it off with Audrey. She is my oldest. And she is almost 8. So this is me like really digging into the archives because I do also feel like there is quite a bit that I've either like blocked out or like the memory just isn't totally there, especially with Audrey's. Like there are huge pockets where I truly don't remember because I was either unconscious or hemorrhaging. So actually, let me give you a quick trigger warning. Audrey's birth was a little bit traumatic. Okay. That's like the trigger warning. If you are headed into birth, like I don't want this to scare you in any way. So yeah, just like be aware of that. All right, so let's do it. So I had gestational hypertension with all 3 of my pregnancies. And with Audrey, I ended up being induced at, I want to say 37 weeks almost exactly. Because my blood pressure was going up and I was like borderline preeclamptic. I did not have protein in my urine, but like it was headed in a not great place, and my blood pressure was not improving. And I ended up going in to be induced, and they started the Pitocin. I don't remember what it's called, but when they insert it to break your water. So I went in around 6 p.m. Jay and I went, and we went to the same diner every time before I went in for my inductions because I was induced with both Liv and Austin as well because of high blood pressure. So Jay and I went in. We were like, okay, it's like go time, like, oh my God, this is really happening. So they started it around 6 p.m. Around, I want to say like 2 in the morning-ish. My water did break, which was great. And then the Pitocin really started to ramp up. And I wasn't progressing super quickly by any means, nor did they kind of expect me to be honest. So it was a long, long day into the evening. And then it was time so I got an epidural because the Pitocin contractions were really intense. And I was like, give it to me. Epidural was amazing. It worked. It was like great. Okay, I was able to relax, get some rest. My mom and sister were both there as well in the room the whole time, which was so cool. So it came time to push. And I remember, and it's so funny that this is what I was thinking of, but I remember, so my brother and I used to swim at my parents' pool, and we were like on the swim team and everything, like we were competitive swimmers. And we would see who could hold their breath the longest underwater, right? So like we could both do 1 lap underwater, but like he could get like at least back to the other side at one point. I could get like halfway, like it was like our thing. And I remember when they were explaining to me how to push, all I could think about was the way I held my breath when I was underwater, like swimming against my brother. So the pushing was not bad. I felt like I had a hold on it, like it was good. As I'm pushing, I really remember, and this is like really digging into my brain. It would almost be interesting. Like I would be curious to hear Jay's recount of it, or even like my sister or my mom's recount of it, because I'm sure that there are things I'm missing or misremembering, and I'll explain in a second. So I was pushing, and all of a sudden my OB told me to stop. And I didn't know what was happening in that moment. Essentially, Audrey was stuck and ended up with shoulder dystocia. So they had to do this maneuver to get her out. And I knew As soon as they got her out and said that she had shoulder dystocia, they were going to take her for an x-ray to make sure that nothing was fractured. Within like moments, literally like maybe a minute, she was out. I remember my OB hitting a button behind my head that like I now refer to as like the crap button. And the room was literally like flooded with people. And it ended up that not only did she have shoulder dystocia, but she also went into respiratory distress shortly after. So they like placed her on my chest briefly. And then I started to hemorrhage. So there was like chaos, right? Like everything. There was so many people in the room. And then I got the shakes. And I don't know if it's even possible to explain the shakes to someone that hasn't experienced it. I've heard that it's the epidural, but then I've also heard that it's just like that adrenaline dump. But I was literally hemorrhaging. I had the shakes, and I remember looking over at Jay and the fear on his face. That is something I don't think I'll ever forget. Like seeing him so scared for me and for Audrey was like, I don't think I'll ever forget it. So I don't really remember much after the shakes started until I remember looking over at my mom, and her and my sister were like, we're going to go with her to the NICU. So they went to the NICU. I don't really remember a ton of what happened to me right after that, but I woke up in the middle of the night without Audrey, not remembering where she was or what happened. And I was like, where is my baby? And the NICU was closed. I couldn't get to her until I think like 7 a.m. It was the longest, most horrific hours of my life, to be completely honest. And I still truly believe that a big part of my postpartum anxiety was because I felt like I had failed her, like right out of the gates, like I was like, I can't even give birth without, like, how am I supposed to do this whole motherhood thing? Like, and so I just desperately wanted to protect her and control what I could because it felt so out of control those hours for me. I didn't know, I knew she was in the NICU. I obviously knew she was being cared for, but I was like, what are they feeding her? What, I didn't even get to try to breastfeed. Like, there were so many things. So Jay was obviously with me, like, calmed me down. As soon as we could in the morning, we went right into the NICU, and like holding her for the first time was just like, it wasn't the first time. I did hold her briefly right after birth, but like holding her and like, like if you're a mom, you'll never forget that moment. And I just like, I have never felt the strength of that need to protect her. And it's just like unexplainable. There were so many things that I feel like happened right after her birth that, again, like definitely shaped things for me. Like, I completely understand that the NICU did what they had to do, and they were incredible, but like I never gave consent to like give her formula, right? Granted, like I was semi-conscious, but they didn't ask Jay either. And like that then became something that I really had to work really hard for because she got used to the formula so quickly. I had low supply. So it took me like months of triple feeding where I would like let her nurse. Then I would pump while I like topped her off with formula because the formula was just like thicker, heavier, like she got used to that. And then I couldn't keep up. And so it took me like months to get her fully off of formula. I had to use a nipple shield. Like there was a lot of struggles that I think made me feel like I kind of was failing, and like I couldn't control so many things that were happening, and it was really hard. Like thinking back on it now, I wish I could go back and just like give myself a hug because it's like it felt really hard because it was really hard. And on top of that, whether it is and I think about this all the time, whether it was who she was going to be anyway, or whether it was my anxiety that contributed to it, or a portion of both, right? Like it's almost like that nature versus nurture thing. She is also like my quote unquote like highly sensitive kid. She's very similar to me in that. And it was harder for me to like calm her than it seemed like it was for my friends who so many of which had babies right around the same time. And I was like, why am I failing at this? Like why can't I calm her so easily? Why can't I know exactly what she needs? Like there were so many things that I wish I could go back and be like, no, Casey, like it's okay for this to feel hard because it is hard. And like, that's fair. That's valid, So there's Audrey's birth story. And she is literally like the most incredible person. So I hope that none of that seems like I'm like blaming her or anything like that, because that's not at all the case. I think truly like it shaped my experience as a first-time mom. But again, I also it's interesting to think about, like, what could have gone differently, what would have been different. But I feel like more than anything, like, she taught me and continues to teach me so much about myself and to, like, love things that were always kind of hard for me to love about myself, which is really special. Like, she's my first baby. She's my firstborn. Like, we grew up together. I learned so much about being a mom and, like, literally finding myself in motherhood, like this new version of myself with her, alongside her. Like, we grew up together, and that's, like, it's really special. Like, I feel like nothing can ever replace that. Motherhood takes energy, and staying hydrated is key. That's why I love Element. It's a tasty electrolyte drink mix that gives you everything you need: sodium, potassium, magnesium, without sugar or fillers. I use it every single day, from after workouts to busy mom days and everything in between. Right now, Element is giving my listeners a free sample pack with any purchase, which gives you 2 of each of their signature flavors, so you can figure out what you love the most. Just head to the link in the episode notes below to get started. And for the record, the lemonade salt is unreal, but they are all so dang good. You'll thank me later. So, on to Livy. So, we got pregnant when Audrey was exactly a year old, like the month that she turned a year old. And so, with when I was induced, her and Liv are right around 20 months apart, and same thing with Liv and Austin. So, when I got pregnant with Livy, because of Audrey's shoulder dystocia, there is, once you have one baby with dystocia, there is a higher risk of it happening again. So throughout my whole pregnancy with Liv, it was part of a conversation about whether I would end up needing to have a C-section. And it was kind of riding on her size, which again, like, is an estimate. So that felt like a gamble. And it just felt pretty uncertain, like I didn't know whether I should opt for a C-section. I didn't know whether I should try to have a vaginal delivery and just see what happened and, like, take that risk. And, like, it felt tumultuous in that, like, again, there was no clear moment that it seemed like there was a definitive, like, no, this is the answer, this is what you have to do, like, period, kind of thing. So thankfully, I had the most wonderful OB who I adore and truly, like, give so much credit for how healing Liv's labor and delivery was, because of, like, her steadfast energy and just her whole being. Like, she was wonderful. I adore her. And she actually delivered Austin as well. I remember it was, like, one of my last appointments before we were really talking induction date. And I remember saying to her, like, I need you to, like, give me something concrete. Like, I need you to be like, Casey, we're doing it. You're going to try to have a vaginal delivery, or, like, Casey, we are doing a C-section. It's too risky. And she basically was like, I can't. But what I can say is that basically that I should try for the vaginal. Like, she was like, your height, the way Liv was measuring at that point, like, all signs were kind of pointing to, like, let's try it. And if God forbid we need to, like, we can do an emergency C-section. So that's what we decided. And we set the induction date. Jay and I went to dinner at the diner and then went to the hospital, and the induction started. And when I tell you that it was such a healing labor and delivery for me, like, I remember, so my sister was there as well. Obviously, my mom wasn't there for Liv's delivery because she was with Audrey, which is, like, what I needed her to be with her. So, like, I didn't have to worry about that because I trust her, obviously, with my life and my children's lives. So she wasn't there for that, but my sister was. And I literally remember I got the epidural and it was like, it worked. It was perfect. I remember when it came time for me to push. So the labor was long. All of my labors were long, like well over 20 hours. Well over 12 hours. Aud and Austin both pushed into, like, closer to that 20-hour range. So, like, that part is not super exciting. But I remember when it came time to push that we were all, like, laughing. Everybody was just like, it was such, like, a lighthearted vibe. Like, everybody was having a great time. My epidural, I was rocking with it. I was like, heck yeah, this thing's awesome. I didn't feel a thing. Like, they turned it down a little so I could feel the pressure, but, like, I still wasn't in pain. And I literally remember my OB being like, stop laughing, or, like, you're gonna, like, push her out. Like, that's how relaxed I was. And it was just it was everything. It was like so healing. They put her on my chest. She got to stay with me. Like there was no, she did end up in the NICU about a week later, not even a week, for jaundice. And that was really intense because I had a baby at home and it was like Thanksgiving Eve. We weren't sure that we were going to be discharged from the NICU in time to like have Thanksgiving with our families. And I was so, so devastated. And the NICU director actually was so incredible. And he was like, I am going to do everything in my power to get you home for Thanksgiving dinner, like with this baby in your arms. And he did. And it was just, there were so many things about Liv's labor and delivery and even afterwards that like just felt like winks, you know, like it's going to be okay. You got this. Like I needed it, you know? So they put her on my chest and, you know, we ended up transferring to the room and it was like great. Like nursing was okay. You know, that was the other thing. Audrey had a tongue tie, which we ended up not intervening with. We still haven't. And so that was part of the complicating factor related to nursing. So I had to use like that nipple shield, like I was saying, all that stuff. But Livy like nursed fine. She actually nursed the longest out of all of my kids to the point that like I was basically a pacifier and I finally had to stop because I was like, I'm going to lose it. Like knowing with my low supply and that at that point she was right around 12 months. I was very newly pregnant with Austin and just like I had to stop. But she nursed well. Like I did still have low supply and I had to supplement with pumping, but that was okay. Like no big deal. And it just felt like it kind of like healed something in me and gave me permission to start to like really think about a third because I wasn't sure. And if she had dystocia or something, like, I don't know that we would have gone for the third, especially because like Jay was on the fence. So it just felt really special and really healing. And maybe I should just go for it with Austin. I'm going to go for it. So Austin's birth story. So coming off of Liv's, I was like riding that high, right? Like I was like, oh, that was so easy. It was amazing. Like best labor and delivery ever. This one's going to be great. Like I was going into it a little cocky. And at that point, it was like the pandemic was happening and restrictions had loosened a little bit at that point, but you could still only have one person with you, which I know I was fortunate to even be allowed to have that because at that point, like even that was questionable up until really like it was almost time for me to deliver him. Like I didn't even know if Jay was going to be able to be there with me. And I was like, I can't. So my sister, because I really wanted her to be there, my sister, we were like, she was going to get like her doula certification so that she could come. And then I don't remember exactly how it happened, but for some reason we thought she was going to be allowed to come into the hospital. And so she lives in Brooklyn and I delivered in New Jersey. So when my pregnancy with Austin was fine, again, I did have gestational hypertension and my blood pressure was definitely higher throughout my entire pregnancy with him, but I did not need to be medicated. I just was on baby aspirin basically. So when it came time for induction, we went to our little diner, we went to the hospital, and I really wanted to try to not get an epidural. I really was like, Liv's was so good. And the other thing with Liv was that like, and I'm sure part of this is because I relaxed once I got the epidural, but I literally got the epidural and I delivered her like, I'm not even kidding, like a half hour later. And I was like, I could have made it. Like if I had known it was only a half hour. In hindsight was 2020. Again, say hindsight, I think that the epidural definitely like allowed me to relax enough that I progressed quicker than I probably would have if I didn't have it. But who knows how much longer it would have been. So I really wanted to try going into Austin's labor. I was like, I want to do the tub. I knew there was a room for it. I wanted to try to not have the epidural and see how it went, right? Social wasn't really a concern anymore. So there was all these factors. And again, I was cocky. Like I really was like, Libby was peasy. I got this. Like, no big deal. Okay, so that's not how it went for the record. So get there. They start the Pitocin. My contractions really started to ramp up pretty quickly. But then like everything kind of stalled. And then everything started to like kind of go downhill. So my sister came from Brooklyn. Well, actually, let me back up even more. I get there. I'm like, if the room with the birthing tub is available, like I would love to have that. They're like, sure, let's see. The nurse that was on shift at that point comes back like 10 minutes later and she's like, oh, the tub is broken. And I was like, oh, bummer. Okay, like, but what can I do about that? It turned out that the tub wasn't broken. Someone just like didn't want to clean it and like go through the process of transferring us, which like in hindsight, again, like that totally sucked. But that was like blow number one. And I was like, dang, okay. So then new nurse comes on. My sister, like things are starting to kind of progress a little bit, but not much. And so my sister makes the trek from Brooklyn to Jersey and gets to the hospital doors. And I like literally know she's outside and they're like, you can't go in. Like completely different information than we had gotten from someone else. So then blow number two, my sister couldn't come in. And I was like, oh my God, like I need her, you know, like she really was my, like a doula for me for Audie and Livy. And I was like, oh my God. So that was like another blow. Then my contractions were like ramping up, but the floor got super busy. And the nurse that I had, and I don't want this to come across as me like knocking her. I don't know enough about that side of it to like truly understand if there were things that were done in the wrong or if not. But basically the floor was packed. Like there were so many people in labor. And at one point she ended up like turning my Pitocin down kind of without the doctor. Well, not kind of without the doctor's permission. My doctor didn't know. And so like my progress completely stalled and I was just having like relentless contractions, but not progressing in terms of like dilating for probably like 3 hours. And then when my OB came in, she was like, why is your Pitocin so low? And I was like, oh, they turned it down. It turned out that like she was tending to other patients. So like she didn't want me it wasn't great. Okay. So that's like blow number 3. So now my labor is like long, like very, very long. We were like approaching 20 hours and nothing was really happening, but my contractions were like truly like relentless. Like they were coming fast and hard, but I wasn't dilating. And it ended up that he was stuck. I had like a cervical lip. So I was stuck at like 7 centimeters, I want to say, for a long time. I tried like getting in the shower and like having just the heat on my back. And I'll never forget at one point, I was like sobbing and I looked at Jay and I was like, I don't want to give up. Like, I don't want the epidural. And he was like, babe, like you're not going to make it if you don't give yourself some relief. And he just like, he has told me since then that like he just could not watch me be in that much pain anymore. And he was worried that like if I didn't get rest, I wasn't going to have the energy to push and like whatever. So I ended up getting the epidural. It failed on one side. So I could literally, like we did all the things. I could feel every part of the right side of my body. Left side of my body was like completely flaccid. I couldn't feel anything. But because we had been like flipping me on my side to see if we could get it to go to the right and like all of these things, and giving like bumps of it, that side was numb for so long, even after I delivered him. And we like, you know, went to our room and all of that stuff like that. It took so long. And again, I could feel everything on my other side. So I don't even know how many blows we're at. But anyway, I got the epidural, had really not much relief, couldn't really sleep, and was still not really progressing. Ultimately, she had to like manually intervene with the cervical lip. And I just remember crying so hard and being like, please just give me a C-section. Like, I can't do this. I need this to be over. It was so long. I was so exhausted. I was in so much pain. And like I said, it was the same OB that delivered Liv. And she looked at me and was like, you can do this. You're going to do this. Like, I'm not taking you for a C-section because that's not ethical, 1. And 2, like, you can do this. And until there's an indication that like, we got to call it, we're not calling it. So ultimately, like, she intervened with the cervical lip and my progress started again and he was born. And it wasn't Livy, like it wasn't like Liv's birth, and it wasn't what I was hoping for in so many ways. But he was there and he was healthy and perfect and wonderful. And after so he also had a little bit of jaundice, but didn't need to be in the NICU. He also had a tongue tie that we did have them intervene with on like day 2 of life. And that's like a whole other story. Like I have so many regrets about how that entire thing went. I don't feel that there's so many things that just looking back on, I'm like, dang, that was not right, you know? So certainly not the like the most healing ending. And I sure did have Jay's vasectomy like booked before we left the hospital. I was like, I'm never doing this again, ever, 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 ever. And I do regret that. I wish I hadn't been so quick because again, I've talked about this, but I would love to even be able to have a consideration conversation about a 4th, but that's not happening. But yeah, I was like, no, I can't do this again. So I guess all this to say, I'm having such like a weird feeling right now that for some reason, telling the birth stories for the first time is like making it seem like, not that I like love one kid more than the other, but, like, that I'm saying that, like, they traumatized me, and I don't want that to be how this is coming across at all. Like, this is me just sharing the birth story and, like, my interpretation of the experience, but, like, they were all beautiful, and they all brought my babies into the world, and, like, I don't regret any part of it. And honestly, I feel like the really incredible part about giving birth and being a mom is, like, even sitting here trying to, like, recall some of this stuff, I'm like, my mind, like, blocked that out. Like, I would totally have another baby, even though, like, in that moment, it was, like, the most horrible, like, 24 hours of my life leading to the birth, but, like, you forget. It's gotta be nature's way of, like, making sure we whatever. But, like, I just wanna, like, make that note that, like, I'm so thankful for all 3 of the labors and deliveries, and, like, while there are things I wish could have gone differently, especially with Austin, where, like, some of those things were preventable or, like, were misunderstandings or, like, that sort of thing, like, that process just felt, like, kind of, like I wanna say, like, looking back in hindsight, kinda disappointing because it didn't have to necessarily be that way, you know? Or some parts of it didn't. But at the end of the day, like, they all were beautiful in that they gave me my babies, and, like, they grew a part of me and a strength in me that I don't think I ever would have known I had if I didn't have them. So, all that to say, it's been an interesting process of, again, like, giving myself grace and encouraging myself to not minimize what I went through because someone else went through something harder or, you know, whatever the case might be. Because I think that's often our tendency, especially when it comes to things that feel traumatic for us. So I hope that was interesting and not just a bunch of rambling and me, like, struggling to remember pockets of things. But I hope it resonates with someone out there, or if you just enjoy listening to birth stories, I hope you enjoyed it. So I will see you next time on another episode of More Than Milestones.